Tonight, we begin a quiet journey far back into the deep past, to a time when our world was colder, wilder, and filled with many different kinds of humans. If you imagine the Earth tens of thousands of years ago, it would look both familiar and strange. Forests stretched across continents. Ice sheets slowly crept over mountains. Herds of animals moved across grasslands that seemed endless. But the greatest difference was not the land. It was the people. Because once, long ago, modern humans were not alone. Our species Homo sapiens shared the world with several other kinds of human relatives. There were the strong and adaptable Neanderthals, who lived across Europe and Western Asia. There were the small and mysterious Homo floresiensis on an island in Indonesia. And somewhere across vast regions of Asia, there lived another group of humans. A group so mysterious that, until recently, we didn't even know they existed. Today, scientists call them the Denisovans. For most of history, their story was completely hidden. They left almost no skeletons behind, no villages, no obvious traces of their existence. Yet strangely, their DNA still lives quietly inside many people today. To understand how scientists discovered this forgotten branch of humanity, we must begin in a very quiet place, a cave, high in the mountains of southern Siberia. The cave lies in the rugged landscape of the Altai Mountains. This is a remote and beautiful region where forests, rivers, and rocky hills stretch across thousands of kilometers. In winter, the temperature drops far below freezing. Snow covers the land for months. But long before modern explorers arrived, ancient humans once passed through this region again and again. Inside one limestone hill sits a small opening in the rock. This opening leads into a site now known as Denisova Cave. At first glance, the cave seems ordinary, a cool chamber of stone, quiet, still. But beneath its floor lies one of the greatest archaeological mysteries ever discovered. For thousands of years, sediments slowly gathered inside the cave. Dust blew in with the wind. Ash from ancient fires settled on the ground. Tiny bones from animals accumulated layer after layer. Each layer became a page in an enormous book of history. And buried inside those layers were clues left behind by ancient humans. In the late 20th century, archaeologists began carefully excavating the cave. They worked slowly and patiently. Using small brushes, trowels, and delicate tools, they removed the soil millimeter by millimeter. Most of what they found seemed ordinary. Animal bones, stone tools, charcoal from ancient fires. But in 2008, something very small appeared. It was a fragment of bone, just a tiny piece of a finger. At first, it didn't seem very special. But this small bone would soon change everything scientists thought they knew about human history. The bone was sent to genetic researchers at the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology, one of the leading scientists studying ancient DNA. There was Svante Pääbo, and his team had already helped decode the DNA of the Neanderthals. They were experts at extracting genetic information from very old bones. But the finger bone from Denisova Cave was incredibly small and extremely fragile. Still, scientists decided to try. They carefully drilled a tiny amount of powder from the bone. Then they began the complex process of extracting ancient DNA. Ancient DNA work is slow and delicate. Every step must be done in clean laboratories. Researchers wear protective suits, masks, and gloves to prevent contamination from modern human DNA, because even a single stray skin cell could ruin the results. Once the DNA was extracted, the scientists began sequencing it, piece by piece, fragment by fragment. At first, they assumed the bone belonged to a Neanderthal. After all, Neanderthals had already been found across Eurasia. But when the genetic results came back, something strange appeared. The DNA was not Neanderthal, and it was not modern human. It was something else entirely. A completely different branch of humanity. A population that had split away from other human relatives hundreds of thousands of years earlier. The researchers were stunned. All this information from a single finger bone. They had discovered evidence of a previously unknown human group. And so, scientists gave this mysterious population a name. They called them the Denisovans, named after the cave where the first clue had been found. It was one of the most surprising discoveries in the history of human evolution, because unlike Neanderthals, whose skeletons had been known for over a century, the Denisovans had almost no physical remains, just a few fragments, a finger bone, a few teeth. Later, a small piece of a jaw discovered in Tibetan Plateau, and yet their genetic fingerprints were everywhere. As scientists compared Denisovan DNA to modern human populations, they noticed something remarkable. People living today in parts of Asia and the Pacific carried Denisovan genes, especially populations in Papua New Guinea, Australia, and other regions of Oceania. Some individuals had up to 5% Denisovan DNA, which meant something extraordinary must have happened long ago. At some point in the distant past, Denisovans and modern humans had met. They had lived near each other, and sometimes they had children together. These encounters happened tens of thousands of years ago, long before written history, long before cities, long before agriculture, and yet their legacy still lives inside human DNA today. It is like a whisper from the deep past, a quiet reminder that our species once shared the world with others. But the story becomes even more mysterious, because scientists still don't fully know what Denisovans look like. Imagine that for a moment. A whole branch of humanity, and we barely know their faces, their bodies, their voices. Most reconstructions are based on DNA clues and comparisons to Neanderthals. They were probably strong and well adapted to cold climates. They likely hunted large animals. They likely made stone tools, and they probably lived in small groups that moved across vast landscapes. But much about their lives remains unknown, which only makes the mystery deeper and more fascinating. As researchers continued studying Denisova Cave, they discovered something even more incredible. The cave had not been home to just one type of human. It had hosted several at different times in history. The cave had been used by Neanderthals, Denisovans, and modern humans. 3 different human groups, returning to the same place across thousands of years. Almost like travelers sharing the same shelter across generations. And in one extraordinary discovery, scientists even found the remains of a teenage girl whose parents belonged to 2 different human groups. Her mother was a Neanderthal. Her father was a Denisovan, a direct child of 2 different branches of humanity, a living symbol of how closely connected these ancient populations really were. The past, it seems, was far more complex than we once imagined. Instead of a single straight path of evolution, human history is more like a braided river. Different streams separating, flowing apart, then sometimes merging again. And somewhere within those ancient currents lived the Denisovans, a people whose story remained hidden for tens of thousands of years, until a tiny finger bone, buried in a quiet cave, began to speak again. And this is only the beginning of their story. Because, as scientists continued exploring Denisova Cave and other sites across Asia, new clues started to appear. Clues suggesting that Denisovans may have lived across enormous distances, from the frozen forests of Siberia to the high mountains of Tibet, and perhaps even the tropical islands of Southeast Asia. A hidden population of humans spread across a continent, waiting to be rediscovered. And as the night grows quiet and the world slows down, we will gently continue our journey deeper into their forgotten past. Take a slow breath and imagine the world again, not as it is today, but as it was tens of thousands of years ago. The continents are familiar, yet the climate is colder. Vast ice sheets stretch across the northern lands. Winds sweep across open grasslands, and forests grow thick in sheltered valleys. This is the time scientists often call the Ice Age. During this long era, the planet moved through cycles of cold and slightly warmer periods. Glaciers advanced and retreated like slow tides of frozen stone. But even in these cold landscapes, life thrived. Great herds of animals crossed the plains: woolly mammoths, steppe bison, wild horses, and giant deer. Predators followed them, from cave lions to packs of wolves. And scattered across these landscapes were small groups of humans, not cities, not kingdoms, just families and bands of hunters moving through forests and valleys, living close to the rhythms of the land. Some of those people were Neanderthals. Others were early Homo sapiens, gradually spreading out of Africa. And somewhere across the enormous lands of Asia were the Denisovans. Because of the small number of fossils, we know far less about Denisovans than we do about Neanderthals. But their genetic clues tell us they were once widespread. Imagine northern Asia during the Ice Age. The region around the Altai Mountains would have been a meeting place of ecosystems. Forests, rivers, and open steppe all existed within traveling distance. It was a perfect environment for hunter-gatherers. Animals migrated through the region seasonally, and humans could follow them. Inside Denisova Cave, ancient fires once burned quietly. Groups gathered around the warm glow of flames while cold winds howled outside. Stone tools were shaped carefully. Bones were broken for marrow. Stories perhaps were shared in voices we will never hear again. These were moments of everyday life, repeated over thousands of years. And each moment left small traces behind: ash in the soil, broken tools, tiny fragments of bone. Layer by layer, these traces built up like the pages of an enormous historical record. When archaeologists excavate such caves today, they carefully remove these layers one at a time. The deeper they dig, the further back in time they travel. In Denisova Cave, some of the deepest layers may be more than 200,000 years old. That means many generations of ancient humans came and went through this same place. Some were Neanderthals, some were Denisovans, and eventually, modern humans also arrived. But the story of the Denisovans begins even earlier. Long before modern humans entered Eurasia, the ancestors of Denisovans and Neanderthals shared a common lineage. Scientists believe that around 400,000 to 500,000 years ago, this ancestral population split into two branches. One branch moved mostly westward and eventually became the Neanderthals. The other branch spread eastward across Asia and evolved into the Denisovans. This ancient split happened deep in the human family tree. Both groups were cousins of modern humans, who evolved separately in Africa. For many thousands of years, these populations lived apart. They adapted to different environments, different climates, different landscapes. Yet, despite their differences, they remained genetically close enough that they could still have children together. And sometimes, they did. This mixing between ancient human groups is known as interbreeding in human evolution. For a long time, scientists thought modern humans completely replaced older human species as they spread across the world. But genetic discoveries have revealed something far more complex. Instead of total replacement, there were moments of connection, moments when populations met, shared territory, and formed families. Those moments left permanent marks in our DNA. For example, people whose ancestors come from Europe or Western Asia often carry a small amount of Neanderthal DNA, but Denisovan DNA appears in a different pattern. It is especially common among people from Oceania and parts of Southeast Asia. In populations from Papua New Guinea, Denisovan ancestry can reach 5%. That may not sound like much, but genetically, it is significant. It means that somewhere in the past, Denisovans and modern humans met multiple times, and those meetings happened far from Siberia. Which raises an interesting question. If the only Denisovan fossils were found in Siberia, how did their DNA reach people thousands of kilometers away? The answer suggests something remarkable. Denisovans may have once lived across a vast part of Asia, perhaps from the cold north all the way to the tropical south. Evidence supporting this idea appeared in an unexpected place, high above sea level, on the windswept heights of the Tibetan Plateau. The Tibetan Plateau is sometimes called the roof of the world. Many parts of it stand more than 4,000 meters above sea level. The air there contains far less oxygen. For most people, living permanently at such heights would be extremely difficult. Yet the people of Tibet have adapted remarkably well. Their bodies process oxygen more efficiently, allowing them to live comfortably in thin mountain air. For years, scientists wondered how this adaptation evolved. Then genetic research revealed something fascinating. A gene that helps Tibetans survive high altitudes appears to have come from Denisovans. At some point in the distant past, Denisovans, who were already adapted to these high environments, interbred with modern humans. Those humans inherited the useful gene, and today, it helps millions of people live in one of the most extreme environments on Earth. In other words, Denisovans helped shape the biology of modern humans. Their legacy is not only historical, it is biological. It lives in the bodies of people today. Now let's return to Denisova Cave for a moment, because one of the most extraordinary discoveries there involved a single bone fragment. In 2018, scientists analyzed a tiny piece of bone from a young girl who lived around 90,000 years ago. When researchers studied her DNA, they realized something astonishing. Her mother belonged to the Neanderthal population. Her father was Denisovan. She was a direct hybrid between the two groups. Scientists nicknamed her Denny. Her existence tells us something important. Neanderthals and Denisovans did not simply meet once or twice. They interacted repeatedly over time. Their populations overlapped. Their lives crossed paths. Perhaps they met while following migrating animals. Perhaps they encountered each other at shared shelters, like Denisova Cave. Whatever the circumstances, they were not strangers to one another. They were neighbors in the ancient world. If we could travel back and watch these encounters, we might see something surprisingly familiar. Small groups approaching cautiously. Curiosity mixed with uncertainty. Gestures and sounds used to communicate. And sometimes, cooperation. Humans, even ancient ones, have always been social beings. Now imagine the landscapes where Denisovans lived. Forests of birch and pine stretching across valleys. Rivers cutting through stone. Snow drifting quietly across open plains. In these places, Denisovans hunted animals with carefully crafted tools. Stone flakes sharpened into cutting edges. Wooden spears hardened by fire. They likely wore clothing made from animal hides to protect themselves from cold climates. And like other human groups, they probably cared for their young and their elders. Their lives would have been challenging, but also deeply connected to the natural world, day by day, season by season, generation by generation. Yet eventually, something changed. By around 40,000 years ago, Denisovans disappear from the fossil record. We do not know exactly why. Perhaps climate shifts changed their habitats. Perhaps expanding populations of modern humans replaced them. Perhaps their populations were always small, and gradual mixing with other humans absorbed them into larger groups. Or perhaps a combination of all these things occurred. Whatever happened, Denisovans as a distinct population faded away, but they were not truly lost, because their DNA continued traveling forward in time, carried quietly through generations, hidden within the genomes of modern people. And thousands of years later, scientists would finally uncover their story, all because of a small bone fragment resting in the quiet darkness of a Siberian cave. And as our calm journey continues, we will soon explore how modern technologies, especially the science of ancient DNA, has opened entirely new windows into the past. Windows that allow us to hear whispers from humans who vanished long ago. Settle in again and imagine a quiet laboratory, late at night. Soft lights glow above rows of scientific instruments. Computers hum quietly. Freezers store samples from ancient bones, each carefully labeled and preserved. In places like these, scientists are learning how to listen to the distant past, not through written records, not through ancient monuments, but through something far more subtle. DNA, the genetic code carried within nearly every cell of living things. DNA is like a long instruction manual for building a body. It contains millions of tiny chemical letters arranged in sequences that guide everything from eye color to metabolism. When living creatures die, their DNA slowly breaks apart. Heat, water, and time damage the molecules. Over thousands of years, most of the original genetic material disappears. But sometimes, under special conditions, fragments survive. And if scientists are careful enough, those fragments can be recovered. This field of research is known as ancient DNA research. It is one of the most powerful tools modern science has for understanding human evolution. And few people have shaped this field more than Svante Pubo. For many years, scientists believed recovering DNA from extremely old fossils would be impossible. The molecules were simply too fragile. But Pubo and his colleagues proved that, with careful techniques and new technologies, even very ancient bones could still hold genetic secrets. Their work at the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology transformed the study of human ancestry. The discovery of the Denisovans is one of the most remarkable results of that work. Remember the tiny finger bone discovered in Denisova Cave in 2008? At first glance, the bone seemed unremarkable, but inside it remained small fragments of ancient DNA. Those fragments were carefully extracted and sequenced. Sequencing DNA means reading the order of its chemical letters, A, T, C, and G. Each letter represents a chemical base, and the exact sequence of these bases carries biological information. For modern humans, the full genome contains about 3 billion of these letters. Ancient DNA is usually far more fragmented. Scientists may only recover small pieces at a time, but with powerful computers, those pieces can be assembled like a vast puzzle. When researchers compared the Denisova DNA to the genomes of modern humans and Neanderthals, something extraordinary appeared. The Denisova genome was clearly different, distinct enough to represent a separate population of humans, yet still closely related to both Neanderthals and modern humans. This discovery was revolutionary because it showed that ancient human diversity was greater than previously imagined. For decades, textbooks described human evolution as a relatively simple, branching tree. But genetic discoveries have revealed something more complicated. Instead of a neat tree, human evolution resembles a web of connections. Different populations separated, adapted to new environments, and sometimes met again. When they met, they occasionally exchanged genes. These exchanges are called genetic Denisovan DNA in modern humans is one example of this process. But Denisovans also mixed with other ancient populations. Some Denisovan genomes show signs of interbreeding with Neanderthals, which means these two groups were interacting long before modern humans arrived in their regions. Human history, it seems, has always been full of movement and connection. Now imagine the Altai region, again during the Ice Age. Snow falls gently across the forest. A group of Denisovans travels along a river valley. They carry stone tools and perhaps wooden spears. Their clothing may be made of carefully stitched animal hides. Nearby, herds of wild horses graze on open grasslands. In the distance, another group approaches. They look similar, but slightly different. These are Neanderthals. Perhaps the two groups notice each other cautiously. Encounters between unfamiliar groups could be tense, but they might also bring curiosity, trade, or cooperation. And occasionally, families formed between these groups. Evidence for such interactions was discovered through the remains of a young girl found in Denisova Cave. Her DNA showed that her mother was Neanderthal, and her father Denisovan. Scientists sometimes refer to her informally as Deni. She lived around 90,000 years ago. Her existence reveals that these ancient populations were not isolated. They shared landscapes. They crossed paths. They became part of one another's stories. Now let your thoughts drift southward across Asia, thousands of kilometers away from Siberia, toward warm, tropical islands and coastal forests. Because Denisovan DNA appears most strongly in populations living far from the Altai Mountains. People in Papua New Guinea, Philippines, and Australia carry significant Denisovan ancestry. This pattern puzzled scientists at first. How could people so far away share DNA with a population known only from a Siberian cave? The most likely explanation is that Denisovans were once widespread across Asia. Perhaps there were several Denisovan populations, some living in cold northern environments, others adapted to tropical forests or mountain plateaus. Over tens of thousands of years, these groups may have evolved unique regional traits, but they still shared a common ancestry. Imagine a vast map of ancient Asia. Small human populations scattered across mountains, plains, forests, and coastlines. Each group living with intimate knowledge of its environment, knowing where animals migrate, where edible plants grow, where fresh water flows. These groups were not large, perhaps only a few dozen individuals in each band. But their survival depended on cooperation, skill, and memory passed through generations. Children learned from elders. Hunters shared knowledge of the land. Stories helped preserve important information. In this way, cultures slowly developed. Even though we have little direct evidence of Denisovan culture, it is almost certain they had traditions and knowledge of their own. Stone tools discovered in Denisova Cave show careful craftsmanship. Some layers of the cave contain sophisticated tools made from carefully shaped stone blades. Other discoveries suggest Denisovans may have used bone tools and ornaments. One remarkable object found in the cave was a beautifully polished bracelet carved from green stone. The bracelet was discovered in a layer associated with Denisovans. Its smooth surface and drilled hole suggest careful craftsmanship. Creating such an object would have required patience and skill. It also hints at something deeper. Aesthetic sense. Perhaps even symbolic meaning. These small glimpses remind us that Denisovans were not primitive or simple. They were human in ways we are only beginning to understand. Their thoughts, emotions, and relationships likely felt familiar in many ways. They cared for their families. They faced challenges from nature. They experienced joy and loss. And for tens of thousands of years, they lived across landscapes that today feel almost mythically ancient. Then slowly, something changed. Modern humans began spreading across Eurasia. These migrations likely began around 70,000 years ago. Groups of Homo sapiens moved from Africa into the Middle East. From there, they spread into Europe, Asia, and eventually Australia. Along the way, they encountered other human populations. Sometimes those encounters involved competition. Other times, they led to cooperation and interbreeding. The genetic evidence suggests that Denisovans and modern humans met multiple times, especially somewhere in Southeast Asia. These meetings left lasting genetic legacies. Genes that helped modern humans adapt to new environments. Genes that still exist in living people today. And yet the Denisovans themselves gradually disappeared. Their populations shrank. Their distinct identity faded. Until eventually, they were gone as a separate group. But the story did not truly end. Because science would rediscover them thousands of years later. Hidden not in legends, but in the code of life itself. And as we continue our quiet journey through the past, the next chapter will explore the landscapes Denisovans may have traveled across. From frozen Siberian valleys, to high mountain plateaus, to the distant islands of the Pacific. A world of ancient migrations and forgotten journeys. Let your mind drift once more into the distant past. Imagine standing on a wide plain in ancient Asia. The air is cool, the sky vast, and the wind moves gently. This is the world of the Pleistocene Epoch, a time stretching from about 2.6 million years ago until roughly 11,700 years ago. The Earth's climate shifted again and again. Glaciers expanded, then retreated. Sea levels rose and fell. These climate cycles reshaped landscapes over and over. Every change created new challenges and opportunities for humans. For the Denisovans, survival meant adapting to many environments. The first fossils discovered in Denisova Cave suggest some Denisovans lived in cold, mountainous regions of Siberia. Rivers carve winding paths. Winters are harsh, with temperatures dropping far below freezing. Yet humans lived here successfully. Inside Denisova Cave, ancient groups found shelter from storms and predators. The cave sits high on a hillside. From its entrance, ancient hunters could observe animals below. It was an excellent location for a temporary camp. Archaeologists discovered many layers of occupation inside. Some layers contain tools associated with Neanderthals. Others contain evidence of Denisovans. Still others contain remains left by early Homo sapiens. The cave was used again and again across thousands of years, almost like a resting place along ancient migration routes. But Denisovans likely lived far beyond this one location. Their genetic traces appear across vast regions of Asia. One of the most fascinating clues comes from the Tibetan Plateau. This enormous plateau is often called the roof of the world. Average elevations there exceed 4,000 meters above sea level. The air contains much less oxygen than at lower altitudes. Most humans would struggle to live permanently in such conditions. Yet today, the Tibetan people thrive there. Their bodies carry special genetic adaptations that help them process oxygen efficiently. Scientists studying these genes made an astonishing discovery. One of the key genes responsible for high-altitude adaptation appears to have originated from Denisovans. This gene variant, known as EPase-1, helps regulate the body's response to low oxygen levels. When modern humans arrived in high-altitude regions, some inherited this useful gene through interbreeding with Denisovans may have already been living in high mountain environments long before modern humans arrived. Their genetic legacy allowed later populations to survive there more easily. This discovery reveals something important. Denisovans were not confined to a single environment. They were flexible and adaptable. Some populations lived in cold, northern forests. Others may have lived in mountainous plateaus. And still others may have inhabited tropical regions much farther south. Now imagine traveling thousands of kilometers southeast from Siberia. You move across grasslands, deserts, and forests. Eventually you reach the islands of Southeast Asia. During the Ice Age, sea levels were much lower than today. Large portions of land, now underwater, were once exposed. Many islands were connected to the mainland. This allowed animals and humans to travel across regions, now separated by ocean. Ancient humans gradually spread. Some groups eventually reached Indonesia. Here, archaeologists discovered another mysterious human species, Homo floresiensis, nicknamed the Hobbits. These small humans lived on Flores until around 50,000 years ago. Their existence shows how diverse ancient human populations once were, and it raises a fascinating possibility. Did Denisovans ever encounter these small, island humans? Scientists are still searching for clues. Genetic studies suggest Denisovans mixed with multiple populations across Asia. Some researchers believe there were several different Denisovan groups, each with slightly different genetic characteristics. If true, Denisovans might have occupied an enormous territory. From the cold mountains of Siberia to the tropical forests of Southeast Asia to the high plateaus of Tibet. This would make them one of the most geographically widespread human populations of the ancient world. Yet their fossil record remains incredibly sparse. Why? One reason may simply be chance. Fossils form only under very specific conditions. Bones must be buried quickly and preserved in stable environments. Even then, many fossils remain hidden or erode away. Another reason is that Denisovans may have lived in regions where fossil preservation is rare. Tropical environments, for example, tropical environments often destroy bones quickly through heat, moisture, and microbial activity. This means entire populations may leave almost no physical remains, but their DNA can still survive inside modern human genomes. This is why genetics has become such an important tool. By analyzing modern populations, scientists can trace where Denisovan genes appear most frequently, and those patterns offer clues. For example, people in Papua New Guinea carry some of the highest levels of Denisovan ancestry in the world. Some individuals have up to 5% Denisovan DNA. This suggests Denisovans and modern humans met somewhere in Southeast Asia or nearby regions before humans migrated toward Oceania. Those meetings may have happened around 50,000 years ago. Imagine small groups of modern humans arriving in unfamiliar lands. They travel along coastlines, through forests, across rivers. Eventually they encounter another group of humans. These people look different, perhaps broader faces, perhaps stronger builds. But they are recognizably human. Communication may have been limited. Yet curiosity might overcome fear. And over time, interactions between these groups lead to shared ancestry. These moments, quiet and ordinary at the time, would eventually shape the genetics of millions of people. All because two ancient populations met in a distant landscape. Now return your thoughts to the quiet darkness of Denisova Cave. Deep inside, the layers of sediment continue to hold secrets. Each grain of soil contains microscopic clues. Fragments of pollen reveal ancient plant life. Animal bones show what species lived nearby. Stone tools reveal human activity. And sometimes, hidden among those layers, are pieces of ancient human remains. Each discovery helps scientists reconstruct a tiny part of the Denisovan story, piece by piece, layer by layer, like assembling a puzzle whose pieces have been scattered across time. And though much remains unknown, every new discovery brings us closer to understanding these mysterious relatives, a people who lived across vast lands, adapted to extreme environments, and left a quiet but lasting legacy in our DNA. As the night grows deeper and the world becomes more peaceful, we will soon continue our gentle exploration. Next, we will look more closely at Denisovan tools, culture, and the possible daily lives of these forgotten humans. Because even though their bones are rare, the traces of their lives still remain, waiting patiently for us to notice. Let your thoughts slow again as we return to the quiet landscapes of ancient Asia. The wind moves gently through tall grass, a river flows steadily through a wide valley, and somewhere along its banks, a small group of Denisovans prepares for the day. We cannot see them directly. No complete skeleton has ever been found to show us exactly what they looked like, but scientists can make careful guesses by studying the few fossils and genetic clues that exist. The people we call Denisovans were likely strong and well adapted to harsh environments. Their closest known relatives were the Neanderthals. Because of this relationship, researchers believe Denisovans may have shared some similar physical traits. They may have had broad faces, strong jaws, and powerful bodies built for endurance and survival in difficult climates. But even more fascinating than their appearance is the question of how they lived. To understand that, scientists turn to the clues left behind in places like Denisova Cave. Inside the cave, archaeologists have uncovered many tools. These tools are made mostly from stone. At first glance, they may seem simple, sharp flakes chipped from larger rocks, but making such tools required skill and knowledge. Imagine a Denisovan craftsperson sitting beside a small fire. In their hands is a piece of stone, perhaps flint or chert. They hold it carefully and strike it with another stone. A sharp crack echoes softly. A thin flake breaks away. The flake's edge is razor sharp, perfect for cutting meat or shaping wood. This process is known as stone tool knapping. It takes practice and patience to do well. Strike too hard, and the stone shatters. Strike too gently, and nothing happens. The craftsperson must understand how the stone will fracture. Each tool becomes the result of experience passed down through generations. These tools allowed Denisovans to butcher animals, scrape hides, cut plants, and shape wooden implements. Stone tools were essential for survival, but they were not the only objects Denisovans created. One of the most intriguing discoveries at Denisova Cave was a bracelet. The bracelet was made from polished green stone. Its surface was smooth and carefully shaped, and most remarkably, it had a perfectly drilled hole. This suggests that whoever made it possessed impressive craftsmanship. The stone used in the bracelet may have come from many kilometers away. The Denisovan bracelet suggests that these ancient humans may have shared similar impulses. Another clue to Denisovan culture comes from animal bones discovered in archaeological layers. Many bones show cut marks from stone tools. This indicates that Denisovans hunted animals and processed their meat. Imagine a hunting party moving quietly across the Ice Age landscape. They track the movement of a herd. Perhaps wild horses or deer grazing along a river valley. The hunters carry wooden spears tipped with sharpened points. They move carefully, using the wind to hide their scent. At the right moment, they rush forward. A spear is thrown. The animal falls. Such hunts would have required teamwork and coordination. Afterward, the group would butcher the animal using their stone tools. Meat would be shared. Hides could be turned into clothing. Bones might be shaped into tools. Nothing would be wasted. Life in the Ice Age demanded efficiency. Resources were precious. Communities depended on cooperation to survive. But Denisovans were not only hunters. Like other ancient humans, they likely gathered plant foods as well. Seeds, roots, nuts, and berries could provide important nutrients. Different seasons would bring different foods. Spring might offer young shoots and eggs from nesting birds. Summer might provide berries and fruits. Autumn could bring nuts and migrating animals. Winter would be the most difficult season. During cold months, stored food and successful hunts would be essential. Shelter also mattered. Caves such as Denisova Cave provided natural protection from wind and snow. But many Denisovan groups probably lived outdoors much of the time. They may have built temporary shelters using branches, animal hides, and stone. These camps could be moved as groups followed migrating animals or seasonal resources. Now imagine a quiet evening at such a camp. The sky slowly darkens. Stars begin to appear overhead. In the center of the camp, a fire burns. Fire was one of the most important technologies for ancient humans. It provided warmth, protection from predators, light during long nights, and the ability to cook food. Cooking made meat easier to digest and safer to eat. Around the fire, members of the group rest after a long day. Children sit close to adults. Someone adds another piece of wood to the flames. Perhaps stories are told. Perhaps knowledge is shared about animals, weather, or distant places. Though we cannot hear their voices today, it is likely that Denisovans had language of some kind. Communication would have been essential for cooperation and teaching, and like all humans, they probably experienced emotions: fear, joy, curiosity, affection. Their lives were not only about survival, they were about relationships, family, community, and a shared experience of living in a challenging world. The Denisovans lived this way for tens of thousands of years, across forests, mountains, and plains. Their populations may have been small and widely scattered, but they were resilient, adaptable, capable of surviving in environments that could be harsh and unpredictable. Yet eventually, something began to change. New groups of humans entered their territories. These newcomers were Homo sapiens. Modern humans were spreading across the world. They carried their own cultures, tools, and traditions. And as their populations grew, they began to occupy more and more territory. Sometimes these encounters between different human groups led to cooperation. Sometimes they led to conflict. And sometimes they led to families that blended different ancestries. The Denisovans were part of this complicated story. A story of migrations, meetings, and transformations. Over time, their distinct population faded from the world. But they did not vanish completely. Their genes remained, quietly traveling through generations of modern humans, a hidden inheritance from a forgotten branch of humanity. And as we continue this calm journey through the deep past, we will soon explore how scientists use modern technology to trace those genetic echoes across the globe. Because even today, the Denisovans are still with us, not as a living population, but as a subtle thread woven into the fabric of human history. Now, allow your mind to drift gently across time, thousands of years into the past, and then forward again to the present. Even though Denisovans disappeared as a distinct population tens of thousands of years ago, their story is not finished. They live on quietly inside the genomes of millions of people around the world. Modern science has given us the ability to trace this hidden inheritance. By carefully analyzing DNA from living populations, researchers can identify fragments that came directly from Denisovans. One of the most striking patterns appears in people of Papua New Guinea and nearby islands. Some individuals carry up to 5% Denisovan DNA. This is a significant amount for a population that has lived tens of thousands of years after Denisovans themselves vanished. The question naturally arises: how did this DNA travel so far from Siberia? The most likely answer is migration. Ancient Denisovans did not live only in one place. Evidence suggests that multiple populations existed, stretching across Asia. Some may have moved toward high plateaus like Tibet. Others may have lived in tropical or coastal regions of Southeast Asia. As Homo sapiens spread across these regions, they encountered Denisovan groups. Encounters may have been brief or extended. Some led to cooperation, some led to conflict, and some led to families whose children carried the genes of both populations. These genetic traces are more than scientific curiosities. They provide hints about survival, adaptation, and resilience. For instance, a gene that allows modern Tibetans to thrive at high altitudes comes from Denisovans. This gene helps the body manage low oxygen levels in mountainous environments, offering a direct example of how Denisovans shaped human biology. But DNA is not the only story it tells. By studying patterns of Denisovan ancestry across the world, scientists can reconstruct ancient migration routes. They can see where Denisovan populations once lived, how humans encountered them, and how these encounters shaped the future of our species. In a way, our own bodies become historical maps. Tiny fragments of chromosomes, inherited quietly through countless generations, mark the paths of forgotten humans. Each strand of DNA is a whisper from the past, reminding us that our species did not emerge in isolation. We are part of a tangled, interconnected history of life. Let us return for a moment to Denisova Cave, the place where the Denisovan story first emerged in modern science. Imagine the quiet work of archaeologists carefully uncovering layers of sediment. Each layer is like a page in a vast book. Dust and ash, animal bones, and fragments of tools accumulate over time. And sometimes, a single fragment, a finger bone, a tooth can, reveals something extraordinary. Such discoveries remind us of the fragility and impermanence of life. They also remind us that even the smallest objects can carry profound meaning. A tiny bone in a remote cave became the key to uncovering an entire human population that had been hidden for tens of thousands of years. From the cave, let us drift again across landscapes. Picture snowy Siberian valleys, rivers winding through green plains, and forests where herds of ancient animals grazed. Picture high mountain plateaus and tropical forests far to the south. These were the lands of the Denisovans, stretching across Asia. And now, imagine the quiet continuity of time. Seasons passed. Generations were born, lived, and died. Some Denisovans met Neanderthals. Some met modern humans. Some gave rise to children whose genes traveled through the ages, quietly embedded in populations far away from the caves and mountains of their ancestors. Their story is a gentle reminder that the past is never completely lost. Even in silence, it speaks to us. Even in absence, it shapes who we are today. As we continue to drift in this calm exploration, soon we will move from the distant past to consider the modern world's understanding of the Denisovans. We will examine the tools, DNA, and ancient mysteries that allow us to hear whispers from a people who vanished, yet left a legacy still alive within us. Take another slow breath and allow the mind to wander again into deep time. The night is quiet, the world feels slower, and our journey continues across the ancient landscapes of the Ice Age. Far beyond the cities and highways of today, the earth once held vast open wilderness. Forests stretched for thousands of kilometers. Grasslands rolled like oceans beneath wide skies. Rivers wandered through valleys untouched by dams or bridges. In this ancient world, many kinds of humans lived side by side. One of those groups was the mysterious population we now call the Denisovans. For most of history, their existence remained completely unknown. Unlike the Neanderthals, whose fossils had been discovered in the 19th century, Denisovans left behind very few recognizable bones. In fact, nearly everything we know about them began with a small fragment discovered in Denisova Cave. But the deeper scientists looked into Denisovan DNA, the more surprising the story became, because it soon became clear that Denisovans were not just a small, isolated group living in one cave. Instead, they were likely part of a large and widespread population that once occupied enormous parts of Asia. To understand this possibility, we must imagine ancient Asia as it existed tens of thousands of years ago. The climate during the Pleistocene Epoch was cooler and often drier than today. Glaciers covered much of the northern continents. But between the icy regions lay vast areas of grassland and forest. Animals thrived in these environments. Great herds of mammoths moved across the steppe. Bison grazed along river valleys. Wild horses galloped through open plains. Predators such as cave lions and wolves followed these herds. And where animals gathered, humans were never far away. Ancient human groups depended on these animals for food, clothing, and tools. Hunters tracked migrations carefully. Knowledge of the land, passed down through generations, was essential for survival. Some Denisovan groups likely lived in the mountainous north. Others may have lived thousands of kilometers away, in very different environments. The genetic evidence suggests Denisovans adapted to both cold and high-altitude regions. One particularly fascinating example comes from the Tibetan Plateau. As we mentioned earlier, people living on this plateau today carry a special gene that helps them survive in thin air. This gene variant is known as EPase1 gene. Scientists studying this gene discovered something remarkable. The version found in Tibetans closely matches the Denisovan version. This means Denisovans likely adapted to high-altitude environments long before modern humans arrived there. When modern humans eventually migrated into the region, they inherited this useful gene through interbreeding. In this way, Denisovans helped modern humans survive in one of the most extreme environments on Earth. But the Denisovan influence did not stop in the mountains. It also extended far south. Modern populations, in places such as Papua New Guinea and parts of Southeast Asia, carry some of the highest levels of Denisovan ancestry in the world. Some individuals have up to 5% Denisovan DNA. This pattern suggests that Denisovans once lived somewhere along the migration routes that early humans used to reach these regions. Perhaps Denisovan groups inhabited forests or coastal plains that are now underwater due to rising sea levels. During the Ice Age, the oceans were much lower than they are today. Large areas of land connected parts of Southeast Asia that are now separated by water. This ancient landmass is known as Sunda Shelf. It connected regions that are today part of Indonesia, Malaysia, and surrounding islands. Humans and animals could travel across these lands on foot. Imagine forests filled with birds and insects, rivers winding through dense jungle, and small groups of Denisovans moving quietly through these environments. Their lives would have required a deep understanding of the land. They would need to recognize edible plants, track animals, avoid predators, and navigate through unfamiliar territory. Eventually, modern humans entered these landscapes. The spread of Homo sapiens across Asia began roughly 70,000 years ago. Over thousands of years, these travelers moved through deserts, mountains, forests, and coastlines. Some groups followed rivers inland. Others traveled along coastlines rich with seafood. As they moved eastward, they encountered populations already living in these lands. These included Neanderthals in Western Eurasia and Denisovans across parts of Asia. What happened during these encounters remains largely unknown. There were probably many different outcomes. Some meetings may have been cautious, small groups watching each other from a distance. Others may have involved cooperation, shared hunting grounds, exchange of knowledge, and occasionally intermarriage. These moments left genetic signatures that scientists can still detect today. Through DNA analysis, researchers have found Denisovan genetic fragments in many populations. These fragments are like ancient echoes. Each one represents an encounter that happened tens of thousands of years ago. The Denisovans themselves eventually disappeared as a distinct population, but their genes continued traveling through time, carried quietly in the bodies of their descendants. Today, when scientists analyze human genomes, they sometimes discover these Denisovan fragments, a tiny piece of DNA inherited across thousands of generations. Each fragment tells a small story about the past, where humans traveled, who they met, and how different populations interacted. In many ways, this research is transforming our understanding of human history. For a long time, scientists imagined human evolution as a simple progression, one species replacing another in a straight line. But the truth appears to be far more complex. Ancient human populations interacted in ways that resemble a network rather than a single path. Genes moved between groups. Populations merged and separated. The human story became a tapestry woven from many threads. The Denisovans were one of those threads, a thread hidden for thousands of years, until a small bone fragment in a Siberian cave allowed scientists to rediscover it. And now, as we continue this calm journey through the deep past, we will begin exploring some of the most remarkable discoveries connected to Denisovans, including mysterious fossils found far from Siberia, and clues suggesting there may have been multiple Denisovan populations across Asia. Each discovery brings us closer to understanding who these ancient people were, and how their lives became part of our own story. Let your thoughts drift gently now, toward the high mountains of Asia. Imagine towering peaks rising above the clouds. Cold winds move across wide stretches of grassland. The air is thin, and every breath feels slightly lighter than it should. This is the vast and breathtaking Tibetan Plateau, often called the roof of the world. Today, millions of people live here. But life at such heights is never easy. The altitude of the plateau averages more than 4,000 meters above sea level. At these elevations, the atmosphere contains far less oxygen. For most people arriving from lower regions, this environment causes headaches, fatigue, and difficulty breathing. Yet the people who have lived here for thousands of years are remarkably well adapted to these conditions. Their bodies process oxygen more efficiently. Their blood carries oxygen in a way that prevents many health problems. For decades, scientists wondered how this adaptation developed. The answer, surprisingly, leads us back to the Denisovans. But the discovery that helped confirm this connection began not in a genetics laboratory. It began in a quiet cave high in the mountains. In 1980, a Buddhist monk exploring a sacred cave found something unusual on the cave floor. It was part of a human jawbone. The cave was known as Bashia Karst Cave. At the time, the fossil received little attention. But years later, scientists began studying it more closely. The jawbone was large and strong, with massive molar teeth. Its features did not match modern humans exactly, but it did not match Neanderthals either. For a long time, researchers could not determine exactly who this ancient individual had been. Then, in the early 21st century, new scientific techniques offered a solution. Normally, scientists would attempt to extract ancient DNA from a fossil to identify its ancestry. But the jawbone from Bashia Cave had been exposed to environmental conditions that made DNA recovery extremely difficult. Instead, researchers turned to another method. They studied ancient proteins preserved in the fossil. This technique, known as paleoproteomics, can sometimes reveal evolutionary relationships, even when DNA is too degraded to analyze. By examining the proteins within the fossilized bone, scientists made a remarkable discovery. The proteins closely matched those of Denisovans. This meant that the jawbone belonged to a Denisovan individual who lived on the Tibetan Plateau approximately 160,000 years ago. This discovery changed how scientists viewed Denisovan history. Until then, Denisovans had only been confirmed from fossils in Denisova Cave, thousands of kilometers to the north. But the Bashia jawbone proved that Denisovans had reached the high mountains of Tibet long before modern humans arrived. It also strengthened the genetic evidence linking Denisovans to the high-altitude adaptation seen in modern Tibetan populations. In other words, Denisovans were already thriving in extreme environments where oxygen was scarce. Over many generations, their bodies had adapted to these harsh conditions. When modern humans eventually migrated into the region, they inherited some of these useful genetic traits, and those traits continue to help people survive at high altitudes today. The story of the Bashia jawbone also hints at something even more intriguing. If Denisovans lived in both Siberia and Tibet, they must have occupied an enormous territory. Imagine the journey between these two regions. The distance between the Altai Mountains and the Tibetan Plateau is thousands of kilometers, across deserts, rivers, forests, and mountain ranges. For ancient humans to inhabit both areas, their populations must have spread widely across Asia, and if they lived across such a large area, it is very possible that different Denisovan groups developed their own regional characteristics. Some may have adapted to cold northern climates, others to high mountain plateaus, and still others to warmer environments farther south. Scientists sometimes refer to this possibility as Denisovan population diversity. Instead of one single Denisovan group, there may have been several related populations spread across Asia, each group sharing ancestry, but adapting to local conditions over thousands of years. This would help explain why Denisovan DNA appears in many different modern populations. For example, Denisovan genetic fragments found in people from Papua New Guinea are somewhat different from those found in populations from East Asia. These differences suggest that modern humans may have encountered Denisovans in several separate regions, each meeting left behind a slightly different genetic legacy. and each legacy tells a story about ancient encounters. Imagine again the landscapes of Asia during the Ice Age. Great rivers flowing across plains, dense forests alive with animals, mountain passes connecting distant valleys. Across these landscapes, small groups of humans traveled slowly. They followed animals, they explored new territories, and occasionally, they met other humans who had lived in these lands for generations. Some of those humans were Denisovans. Perhaps the meetings were cautious at first. Two groups observing each other across a riverbank. Curious, uncertain, but over time, contact increased. Knowledge could be shared. Hunting techniques, routes through the mountains, locations of reliable water sources. And sometimes, these encounters formed deeper connections. Families, children, shared ancestry. These moments, simple, human moments, would eventually echo through time. Their traces would remain hidden in DNA, waiting tens of thousands of years for scientists to uncover them. The Denisovans themselves left behind very few bones, but their influence can still be felt. In the genes that help people breathe easily at high altitudes, in the fragments of DNA found in populations across Asia and Oceania, and in the growing understanding that the human story is not a single line of evolution. It is a complex network of journeys and encounters. The Bashir jawbone was another important piece of that network, a silent witness to a time when Denisovans walked the high plateaus of Tibet, long before cities, long before written history, in a world shaped by wind, snow, and ancient mountains. And as our peaceful exploration continues, we will soon look at another fascinating mystery. Scientists have discovered Denisovan DNA in places where no Denisovan fossils have ever been found. How is that possible? The answer reveals how powerful modern genetic science has become, and how the secrets of the past are sometimes hidden inside our own bodies. Allow your thoughts to settle again, gently and quietly. The world around us tonight is filled with modern lights and sounds. Cities glow beneath electric skies, and satellites circle high above the earth. Yet hidden inside every person alive today is a biological record far older than any city or machine. Inside each of our cells lies DNA, and within that DNA is a history stretching back hundreds of thousands of years. Scientists studying human genetics have learned how to read this history, almost like archaeologists digging through ancient layers of soil. Instead of shovels and brushes, they use computers and sequencing machines. Instead of bones and tools, they analyze patterns in genetic code. Through this careful work, researchers have discovered that many people today still carry small fragments of DNA from ancient human populations. Fragments inherited from Neanderthals, and fragments inherited from the mysterious Denisovans. These genetic fragments are incredibly tiny compared with the entire human genome, but they are still recognizable. Each fragment carries unique patterns that distinguish Denisovan DNA from modern human DNA. By comparing genomes from people around the world, scientists can track where Denisovan ancestry appears most often. The results have been fascinating. The strongest Denisovan genetic signals appear among populations in Oceania. People from Papua New Guinea carry some of the highest levels. Many individuals have between 3 and 5% Denisovan ancestry. That might sound small, but genetically it is significant. It means that long ago, Denisovans and modern humans met frequently enough to leave a lasting imprint on future generations. But Denisovan DNA also appears in other places. Small traces have been found in populations across East and Southeast Asia. For example, Denisovan ancestry has been detected in people from China, Japan, and Philippines. However, the patterns of DNA in these regions are slightly different from those in Oceania. This suggests something important. There may have been multiple encounters between Denisovans and modern humans in different locations. In other words, modern humans likely met Denisovans more than once as they spread across Asia. Each encounter left behind a different genetic signature. Imagine ancient travelers moving slowly across unfamiliar landscapes. Groups of Homo sapiens migrating outward from Africa. They crossed deserts, mountains, and rivers. After thousands of years of travel, they reach Asia. Here, they encounter other human populations who have lived in these lands for generations. Some of those populations were Denisovans. When these groups met, many outcomes were possible. They may have competed for resources, they may have avoided one another, or sometimes they may have lived near each other peacefully, and occasionally, individuals from different groups formed families. These relationships created children whose DNA contained a mix of ancestries. Over time, those children grew up and had families of their own. Their descendants continued carrying small pieces of Denisovan DNA, generation after generation, across tens of thousands of years. In this way, Denisovan genes slowly spread across populations, not as a dominant trait, but as a subtle presence, a quiet reminder of ancient connections. One fascinating aspect of this research is that Denisovan DNA sometimes provides advantages. Certain Denisovan genes appear to help modern humans adapt to specific environments. We already discussed the high-altitude adaptation found in people living on the Tibetan Plateau, but there may be other examples as well. Some Denisovan genes are linked to immune system responses. These genes may have helped early humans resist local diseases when they entered new environments. When modern humans migrated into Asia, they encountered unfamiliar pathogens. Inherited Denisovan genes may have provided a small but valuable survival advantage. If individuals with those genes survived more often, their descendants would gradually carry those genes forward. Over time, these beneficial traits could become common in certain populations. In this way, Denisovans contributed not only to the genetic diversity of modern humans, but also to our ability to adapt to different environments. Yet, there is still much scientists do not know. For example, researchers are still searching for more Denisovan fossils. At present, only a few confirmed Denisovan remains have been discovered. These include the finger bone, several teeth, and fragments of bone found in Denisova Cave, as well as the jawbone from Bashia Karst Cave. Considering the wide distribution of Denisovan DNA, it is very likely that more fossils remain hidden across Asia, perhaps deep within caves, perhaps buried beneath layers of soil in remote valleys, or perhaps in regions that archaeologists have not yet explored. Every new discovery could change our understanding of Denisovans. It could reveal what they looked like, how they lived, and how they interacted with other human populations. Some scientists believe Denisovans may have been among the most adaptable humans of the ancient world. They survived in cold Siberian mountains. They thrived on high plateaus, and they may have inhabited tropical forests far to the south. Such adaptability suggests intelligence, creativity, and resilience. The Denisovans were not primitive creatures. They were humans different from us, but deeply connected to our shared past. As the science of genetics continues advancing, researchers are discovering new ways to explore ancient DNA. Entire genomes can now be sequenced from tiny fragments of bone. Advanced algorithms can detect even faint traces of Denisovan ancestry in modern populations. Each breakthrough reveals new pieces of the puzzle. And slowly, the story of Denisovans becomes clearer. But there is still mystery. And perhaps that mystery is part of what makes their story so captivating. A population of humans who lived across vast landscapes, who left behind almost no visible trace, yet whose legacy continues to live quietly within us. As our journey continues, we will soon explore how Denisovans interacted not only with modern humans, but also with Neanderthals. Because the ancient world was not divided neatly between different species. Instead, it was a dynamic landscape of overlapping populations and shared ancestry. Let the pace slow again. Imagine a quiet cave in the mountains of Siberia. Outside, the wind moves through the trees, and the air carries the cold scent of winter. Inside the cave, the ground holds layers of dust and ash that settled there over thousands of years. Allow your thoughts to wander again across the ancient world. Picture the great continent of Asia during the distant past. Mountains rise in the north, rivers stretch across enormous plains, and forests spread through warm southern regions. But if we travel far enough south, the land begins to change. The air becomes warmer. Rain falls more often. Dense jungles fill the landscape with life. This is the region we now call Southeast Asia. Today, Southeast Asia is made up of many islands and peninsulas. But during the Ice Age, the world looked quite different. Sea levels were much lower because vast quantities of water were locked away in glaciers. This exposed enormous areas of land. One of the largest of these ancient landmasses was the Sunda Shelf. It connected parts of what are now Indonesia, Malaysia, and Thailand. Forests and rivers stretched across this enormous region. Animals moved freely across these landscapes, and humans did as well. For ancient travelers, the Sunda Shelf created a vast corridor of migration. Groups of Homo sapiens moved slowly through these lands. Some followed coastlines rich with fish and shellfish. Others explored forests and river valleys. Eventually, these travelers reached areas that are today separated by water. But during the Ice Age, they were connected by land bridges. At the far edge of this region lay another landmass called Sahu. This landmass joined what we now know as Australia and Papua New Guinea. Archaeological evidence suggests humans reached Australia at least 50,000 years ago, possibly even earlier. But something very interesting happened along this migration route. As modern humans moved through Southeast Asia, they encountered Denisovans because the people living in Papua New Guinea today carry some of the highest levels of Denisovan DNA anywhere in the world. But here lies the mystery. No Denisovan fossils have yet been discovered in Southeast Asia. The only confirmed fossils still come from Denisova Cave and Baishia Karst Cave, thousands of kilometers away in the north. One possibility is that Denisovan fossils simply have not been discovered yet. Tropical environments make fossil preservation very difficult. Entire populations could live in such environments without leaving many fossils behind. But their DNA could still survive inside the genomes of modern people. Imagine small groups of Denisovans living quietly within these environments. Their lives would have been very different from those in the cold north. Instead of mammoths and bison, they might hunt forest animals. They would gather fruits, nuts, and roots from the jungle. On the island of Luzon, scientists discovered fossils belonging to a small and unusual human species known as Homo luzonensis. The discovery of Homo luzonensis shows that Southeast Asia was home to several different human populations. It was a region of incredible diversity. Every new fossil discovery in Southeast Asia could reveal new pieces of the Denisovan story. Hidden caves, remote islands, dense forests. Human history is not simple. It is a story of migrations, of encounters, and of genetic legacies that travel through time. As our journey continues, we will soon explore one of the most fascinating questions. What did they actually look like? But new technology is beginning to provide surprising answers. Let the mind settle again into the quiet rhythm of this journey through deep time. Up to now, we have followed Denisovans across landscapes, through Siberian mountains, high plateaus, and perhaps even tropical forests. We have explored their DNA, their migrations, and their encounters with other humans. But one question still lingers gently in the imagination. What did the Denisovans actually look like? For many years, this question remained almost impossible to answer. Unlike the Neanderthals, whose skeletons have been found in many places, the physical remains of Denisovans are extremely rare. Only a handful of bones have been confirmed so far. These include a finger bone, several teeth, and fragments of bone discovered in Denisova Cave. From such small fragments, it is difficult to reconstruct an entire human body. There are no complete Denisovan skulls or full skeletons. For a long time, Denisovans remained almost invisible, a population known mostly through their genetic signature. But in recent years, scientists have begun developing new techniques that allow them to estimate physical features from DNA. DNA contains instructions that influence many aspects of the human body: height, bone structure, skin pigmentation, hair type. By studying which Denisovan genes differ from others, scientists can make educated predictions about their physical traits. Their models suggest Denisovans may have had broad faces and large jaws. Their teeth are unusually large compared with those of modern humans. These massive teeth hint that Denisovans may have had strong jaw muscles to process tough foods such as raw meat and fibrous plants. Their bodies may also have been strong and sturdy. Neanderthals are known for their powerful builds, wide chests, and strong limbs. Denisovans may have possessed similar adaptations, but they may also have developed unique traits depending on where they lived. For example, Denisovans living in high mountain regions might have developed larger lung capacity to cope with thin air. Those living in tropical forests might have developed different body proportions better suited to warmer climates. The jawbone discovered on the Tibetan Plateau is large and powerful. Its teeth are significantly larger than those of most modern humans. Some scientists imagine Denisovans with broad cheekbones and thick brow ridges, somewhat similar to Neanderthals but with their own distinct shape. Imagine meeting one of them in the ancient forests of Asia. Perhaps you would notice their strong jaw and powerful build. They might look unfamiliar at first glance, but still recognizably human. Denisovans were not strange creatures or distant monsters. They were humans. They laughed. They worried. They cared for children. Their story is not just about bones and DNA. It is about lives once lived in forests, mountains, and valleys. As scientists continue exploring caves and analyzing ancient DNA, more Denisovan fossils may eventually be discovered. Until then, Denisovans remain partly hidden in mystery, imagined through science, and remembered through the genetic echoes that remain in us. And now, we will soon explore another fascinating topic. What caused the Denisovans to disappear? Take a slow breath again. Imagine the world slowly turning beneath a quiet night sky, just as it did tens of thousands of years ago. The landscapes of ancient Eurasia stretch endlessly: forests, rivers, open plains, and distant mountains glowing softly under moonlight. For hundreds of thousands of years, different kinds of humans lived across these lands. Among them were the mysterious Denisovans. They survived through harsh climates, changing environments, and countless generations. But eventually, something changed, and slowly, almost quietly, the Denisovans disappeared as a distinct population. Understanding why this happened is one of the most fascinating mysteries in human evolution. Scientists believe that several factors may have played a role: climate, migration, competition, and perhaps even simple chance. To understand this story, we must return once again to the Pleistocene Epoch. During this period, the Earth experienced repeated cycles of cold and slightly warmer climates. Massive ice sheets expanded across large portions of the northern continents. Then, over thousands of years, they slowly retreated. These climate shifts transformed the environment again and again. Forests became grasslands. Grasslands became deserts. Rivers changed course. Animals migrated to new regions. For ancient human populations, these environmental changes created both opportunities and challenges. Groups that could adapt survived. Those that could not sometimes disappeared. The Denisovans had already proven themselves remarkably adaptable. Evidence shows they lived in very different environments: cold mountains of Siberia, high-altitude regions of the Tibetan Plateau, and possibly the tropical forests of Southeast Asia. But around 50,000 to 40,000 years ago, the world entered a period of significant transition. This was also the time when Homo sapiens began spreading rapidly across Eurasia. Modern humans had already evolved in Africa hundreds of thousands of years earlier. But it was during this later period that they expanded across much of the world. Small groups moved into the Middle East. From there, they spread into Europe, Asia, and eventually Oceania. These migrations were slow. They unfolded over thousands of years. But eventually, modern humans reached regions already inhabited by other human populations. In Europe and Western Asia, they encountered Neanderthals, and across parts of Asia, they encountered Denisovans. For a time, these different populations lived side by side. The genetic evidence clearly shows that they interacted. We know this because modern humans still carry small amounts of Denisovan and Neanderthal DNA today. These genetic traces are evidence of ancient encounters that sometimes resulted in families with mixed ancestry. But coexistence may not always have been peaceful. When two populations depend on the same resources, competition can arise. This does not necessarily mean conflict or violence, but even subtle competition can affect survival. If one population grows larger or uses resources more efficiently, the other may slowly decline. Some researchers believe this may have happened when modern humans expanded across Asia. Modern humans possessed certain advantages. They developed increasingly sophisticated tools. They formed complex social networks that allowed information to spread quickly, and their populations may have grown larger than those of Denisovans or Neanderthals. If Denisovan populations were already relatively small, even slight disadvantages could have had major consequences. Over many generations, smaller groups might gradually merge with larger populations. Through interbreeding, Denisovan ancestry would become absorbed into modern human populations. Instead of disappearing completely, their genes would simply blend into the expanding human population. This process is sometimes called genetic assimilation. In this scenario, Denisovans did not suddenly vanish. Instead, their identity as a separate group slowly faded. Their descendants continued living, but now as part of the broader human population. Climate change may also have played an important role. During the late Ice Age, environmental conditions shifted repeatedly. Glaciers expanded. Dry regions spread. Some habitats became less suitable for the animals and plants that ancient humans relied on. If Denisovan populations were adapted to certain environments, these changes might have reduced their available territory. Smaller populations would become even more isolated, and isolated populations are more vulnerable to extinction. Natural disasters, disease, or simple bad luck can have larger effects on small groups. Over thousands of years, such pressures could gradually reduce Denisovan numbers, until eventually, the last distinct Denisovan communities disappeared. But as we have seen, their story did not truly end there, because their genes continued traveling through time, hidden inside the DNA of modern humans. Today, people in parts of Asia and Oceania still carry Denisovan ancestry. In places like Papua New Guinea, Denisovan DNA remains especially strong. These genetic fragments are quiet reminders of ancient encounters, of lives once lived across forests, mountains, and plains, and of a population that shaped the human story in ways we are still discovering. But the Denisovans were not the only human population that disappeared during this period. Around the same time, Neanderthals also vanished. For many years, scientists wondered whether modern humans somehow caused their extinction. The reality is probably more complicated. Climate shifts, population dynamics, and interbreeding all likely played roles. Human history is rarely simple. It is a tapestry woven from many threads, and sometimes those threads merge rather than break. As our quiet journey continues, we will soon explore another fascinating mystery. Even after Denisovans disappeared, their genetic legacy continued influencing human evolution. Some of their genes may still affect how our bodies function today, from immune responses to environmental adaptation. The Denisovan story is still unfolding, not only in ancient caves, but inside living people. Take another slow breath. Imagine time moving quietly forward. The Denisovans as a distinct people may have faded into history tens of thousands of years ago. Yet their story did not disappear. Instead, it continued in a way no one could see for most of human history. It continued inside our DNA. DNA is like a biological memory. Within it are instructions passed down from parents to children for countless generations. These instructions shape the structure of our bodies, the way our cells function, and even how we adapt to different environments. When modern humans met other ancient humans, such as the Denisovans, something remarkable happened. They sometimes had children together. Those children inherited DNA from both groups. Over many generations, these genetic traces were passed down. And although the Denisovans themselves eventually disappeared as a separate population, pieces of their DNA continued to live on in modern humans. Today, scientists can examine human genomes to detect these ancient fragments, and what they have discovered is fascinating. Certain populations carry higher percentages of Denisovan DNA than others. People living in regions of Southeast Asia and Oceania, especially in places like Papua New Guinea, may carry up to 5% Denisovan ancestry. That may sound small, but in genetic terms, it is significant. It means the ancient Denisovans contributed meaningfully to the biological heritage of these populations. But these genetic fragments are not simply historical souvenirs. Some of them appear to play real roles in human biology today. One of the most remarkable examples comes from the high mountains of Asia. The Tibetan Plateau is one of the highest inhabited regions on Earth. The air there contains much less oxygen than at sea level. For most people, spending long periods at such altitudes can cause serious health problems. But the Tibetan people have lived in these mountains for thousands of years. Their bodies are uniquely adapted to the thin air. For a long time, scientists wondered how this adaptation evolved so quickly. Genetic research eventually revealed a surprising answer. One key gene involved in altitude adaptation appears to have been inherited from Denisovans. This gene helps regulate how the body responds to low oxygen levels. It allows Tibetan populations to maintain healthy oxygen levels. In other words, an ancient Denisovan adaptation continues helping people live comfortably in one of the most extreme environments on Earth. Other Denisovan genetic contributions may also affect our immune systems, the body's defense network against disease. When modern humans moved into new regions, interbreeding with local populations like Denisovans may have helped them acquire useful immune system genes. Scientists are still discovering new examples of Denisovan influence. As genetic technology improves, researchers continue examining the genomes of people, and yet, much about the Denisovans remains mysterious. We still know very little about their physical appearance. In 2019, scientists studied a fossil jawbone found on the Tibetan Plateau, the Pleistocene Epoch cave Denisovan mandible. This discovery suggested that Denisovans lived across much of Asia, from cold northern mountains to high plateaus. New technologies allow researchers to extract genetic material from soil sediments where ancient humans once lived. The story of the Denisovans is therefore not finished. It is still unfolding with every new discovery. Because human evolution was never a simple story. It was a complex network of encounters, migrations, and shared ancestry. Their legacy flows silently through the blood of millions. A reminder that the past is never truly gone. It simply changes form. Imagine the ancient world long before cities, roads, or borders. The air is clear and cold in the northern mountains. Far away, rivers move quietly through forests that stretch for hundreds of kilometers. Animals roam freely, herds of wild horses, ancient bison, deer, and sometimes the towering shapes of mammoths, moving slowly across open valleys. In this distant time, many kinds of humans lived on Earth. Among them were the mysterious Denisovans. Although scientists have discovered only a few Denisovan fossils, we can still imagine aspects of their daily lives. The Denisovans lived during the Pleistocene Epoch, a time when the climate was often colder than it is today. To survive in such conditions, Denisovans needed intelligence, adaptability, and cooperation. These groups may have consisted of extended families, parents, children, and relatives traveling together across the landscape. Small communities would move seasonally, following animals and returning to familiar shelters such as caves. One of the most important Denisovan sites discovered so far is Denisova Cave, high in the Altai Mountains. Imagine the Denisovans arriving at the cave during a cold evening. The entrance offers shelter from wind and snow. Inside, the cave is quiet and dark, but a small fire soon fills the space with warmth and flickering light. Children sit close to the flames, while adults prepare food or repair tools. This simple moment, family gathered around a fire, is something shared across thousands of generations of humans. Stone tools found in Denisova Cave indicate that they shaped rocks into sharp edges used for cutting meat and scraping hides. A sharpened stone blade could be used for many tasks, preparing animal skins for clothing or cutting plant fibers. Hunting was likely an important part of Denisovan life. Large animals provided valuable sources of food. Hunters may have used spears tipped with stone points. They might track animals quietly through forests. Successful hunts would have been moments of celebration. Food meant survival for another generation, but Denisovans probably relied on more than just hunting. They likely gathered plant foods as well. Fire would have been essential in Denisovan life. It provided warmth and allowed food to be cooked, and it offered protection from predators that might approach campsites in darkness. Another fascinating discovery is a beautiful bracelet carved from green stone, dating back tens of thousands of years. Jewelry is not necessary for survival, but it suggests they may have appreciated decoration or symbolic objects. The Denisovans were not simply surviving, they were living human lives full of relationships and shared experiences. Yet life during the Ice Age was never easy. Weather could change quickly and food could become scarce. Despite these challenges, they survived for hundreds of thousands of years and left behind a genetic legacy that continues today. Even though we know so little about their faces, their story remains deeply connected to ours. The search for Denisovans continues across remote mountains and hidden caves. New discoveries may still be waiting. The legacy that never disappeared. Let the pace slow once more. Imagine a quiet evening settling across the ancient world. Fires glow softly at the entrances of caves, and stars fill the sky above vast landscapes of forest, mountain, and open plains. For countless generations, human groups lived their lives beneath these same stars. Some of those groups would one day disappear, but their influence would continue in ways they could never have imagined. Among those ancient populations were the Denisovans. Although Denisovans eventually vanished as a distinct group, their story did not end with them. Instead, it became woven into the story of modern humanity. To understand this legacy, we must once again think about how populations interact across time. Human groups have never lived completely isolated. Throughout history, people have migrated, met new communities, shared knowledge, and sometimes formed families together. When Homo sapiens began spreading across Eurasia, they did not enter an empty world. They encountered other human populations who lived there for thousands of years. One of these populations was the Denisovans. When these groups met, the interactions were complex. Sometimes they may have competed for resources. Sometimes they may have avoided one another. And sometimes they formed connections that led to mixed ancestry. Those children carried genetic material from both groups. Over thousands of years, those genetic fragments spread through later generations. Today, scientists can identify these fragments in the DNA of living people. For many individuals in Southeast Asia and Oceania, Denisovan ancestry remains an important part of their genetic heritage. In particular, populations in Papua New Guinea carry some of the highest levels of Denisovan DNA. But Denisovan ancestry is not limited to one region. Smaller traces appear in populations across parts of Asia as well. But Denisovan DNA is more than a historical record. Some of these genes continue to influence how the human body functions today. Earlier, we explored how Denisovan genes help people living on the Tibetan Plateau survive in an environment with very low oxygen levels. Without this genetic adaptation, living at such high altitudes would be far more difficult. But this is only one example. Scientists believe Denisovan genes may also play roles in other biological processes. For instance, some DNA influences the human immune system. When modern humans migrated into new regions, they encountered unfamiliar diseases. Inheriting Denisovan genes may have helped them survive these challenges. In this way, Denisovan ancestry may have contributed to human adaptability, a small genetic advantage passed quietly through generations. Cold northern environments, high mountain plateaus, perhaps even tropical forests. Genes helped humans adapt more quickly to new environments. This idea highlights something remarkable about human evolution. It is not simply a story of replacement. Instead of complete replacement, there was also mixing, interbreeding, shared ancestry. Different branches of the human tree occasionally reconnected. The Denisovans were one part of that network. Their story overlaps with that of Neanderthals and modern humans. One famous example is the Denisovan Neanderthal hybrid discovered in Denisova Cave. This young girl had a Denisovan father and a Neanderthal mother. Her existence shows that these ancient populations were not completely separate. They interacted, they shared territories, and sometimes they shared families. The Denisovans may have disappeared as a distinct group thousands of years ago, but their legacy remains alive in our biology and our genes. Every person alive today carries a story stretching back through countless generations, a story of migrations, encounters, and survival. The Denisovans are part of that story, a hidden chapter that remained unknown until very recently, now becoming clearer with every discovery. Because the deeper we look into our past, the more we realize that humanity has always been interconnected. Could Denisovans have been more technologically advanced than we once believed? Some discoveries suggest they may have created complex objects. If that is true, their cultural lives may have been richer than we ever imagined. Our journey continues into their mysterious world. Let the story resume gently. Imagine standing at the entrance of an ancient cave as the sun slowly rises over distant mountains. The air is cool, and the ground beneath your feet holds layers of history stretching back tens of thousands of years. Somewhere beneath those layers lie small clues, tiny fragments of a world long gone. These clues help scientists understand the lives of the mysterious Denisovans. For many years after their discovery, researchers wondered about something important. How intelligent were the Denisovans? Did they make tools? Did they create art or decorations? Did they share cultural traditions the way modern humans do? Answering these questions is not easy. Unlike some ancient human populations, the Denisovans left behind very few identifiable fossils. Most of what we know comes from a handful of bones. But that cave holds more than just bones. It also contains objects created by ancient human hands. And some of those objects are surprisingly sophisticated. Archaeologists working inside Denisova Cave have uncovered stone tools, fragments of ornaments, and other artifacts buried deep in the cave's ancient sediments. Each artifact offers a small window into the lives of the people who once lived there. Stone tools are among the most common discoveries. These tools are often made by carefully striking one stone against another to produce sharp edges. The resulting blades could be used for many tasks: cutting meat, scraping animal hides, shaping wooden objects, preparing plant materials. Such tools were essential for survival during the Ice Age. But archaeologists have found something even more intriguing. Among the artifacts is a beautifully crafted bracelet made from polished green stone. The bracelet appears to have been shaped with remarkable precision. It contains a drilled hole that may have been used to attach a cord or fastening. The craftsmanship suggests that whoever made it possessed advanced tool-making skills and patience. Creating such an object would require planning and careful shaping. The bracelet is estimated to be around 40,000 years old. For many researchers, this discovery raised an exciting possibility. Could the Denisovans have created decorative objects? If so, it would suggest that they possessed a sense of symbolism or personal expression. Throughout human history, ornaments such as jewelry have often served social or cultural purposes. They might signal identity, status, or group membership. While we cannot know for certain whether Denisovans made the bracelet, its presence shows that someone living there possessed impressive craftsmanship. And if Denisovans were capable of such work, it would reveal a level of cultural sophistication that scientists once doubted. Another discovery in Denisova Cave adds further intrigue. Researchers have found tiny beads made from animal teeth and bone. These beads were carefully shaped and likely worn as necklaces or decorative items. Creating beads requires delicate work. Small holes must be drilled without breaking the material. The surface must be smoothed, and the pieces must be strung together into wearable objects. Such craftsmanship suggests patience, creativity, and social meaning. These are not merely tools for survival. They are objects that express something deeper about the people who made them. This raises an interesting possibility. The Denisovans may have possessed cultural traditions similar to those of other human populations. They may have decorated themselves, shared knowledge across generations, and perhaps even used symbols to represent identity or belief. In the ancient world, culture was often passed down through storytelling and shared practices. Children learned from elders how to make tools, but they may also have learned songs, rituals, or traditions that left no physical trace. Such traditions would vanish when a population disappeared. Yet small clues, like a carved bracelet or a polished bead can, hint at their existence. The Denisovans were clearly capable survivors. They lived in harsh environments and adapted to changing climates. But these discoveries suggest they may also have been thoughtful and creative beings. Their minds may have been far more similar to ours than we once imagined. It is easy to think of ancient humans as primitive, but the reality is far more complex. Even tens of thousands of years ago, human populations were developing tools, traditions, and social structures. They cared for children. They cooperated in hunting and gathering. They shared knowledge and perhaps created objects simply because they were beautiful. As scientists continue exploring Denisova Cave, new discoveries may reveal even more. Each artifact is like a message from the distant past, and perhaps somewhere in a cave yet to be discovered, more Denisovan artifacts are still waiting, hidden beneath layers of time, waiting quietly for someone to uncover them. Let your thoughts drift slowly again into the ancient world. Imagine standing high in the mountains during the distant past. The wind moves softly across rocky slopes, and the air is thin and cold. Snow rests on distant peaks, glowing under pale morning sunlight. In such places, survival is never easy. Yet long before modern equipment and advanced shelters, ancient humans lived in these environments. Among them were the mysterious Denisovans. One of the most fascinating aspects of their history is their ability to survive in extreme environments. Evidence suggests they lived in several very different regions: cold mountain valleys, high plateaus with thin air, and perhaps even warm southern forests. This adaptability may have been one of their greatest strengths. Consider the environment surrounding Denisova Cave in the rugged Altai Mountains. During the Pleistocene Epoch, temperatures were often even colder than today. Snow covered the ground for many months each year. Animals migrated through the valleys, searching for food, and human groups needed to prepare carefully for survival. For Denisovans living in such environments, shelter was essential. Caves like Denisova Cave offered natural protection from wind, snow, and predators. Inside the cave, fire provided warmth and light. Archaeological evidence shows that ancient humans frequently used fire in this cave across thousands of years. Fire allowed people to cook food, making it easier to digest. It also allowed animal skins to be dried and softened into clothing. Clothing would have been especially important in the Ice Age. Scientists believe ancient humans likely used animal hides to create garments. These hides could be wrapped around the body or sewn using bone needles and plant fibers, helping retain body heat in freezing temperatures. Food was another challenge. Large animals like deer, bison, or wild horses roaming the Ice Age landscapes provided valuable nutrition. Hunting required careful planning and teamwork. Roll_03, a group of Denisovan hunters, tracked prey through snowy terrain following footprints and signs. They used spears tipped with sharpened stone points. A successful hunt would bring large amounts of meat back to the group. Some meat was eaten immediately, while other portions might be dried or smoked near the fire to preserve them for later. But Denisovans were not limited to cold regions. A remarkable discovery suggests they also lived high on the Tibetan Plateau. At more than 4,000 meters above sea level, the air contains far less oxygen. Breathing becomes difficult and fatigue sets in quickly. Yet Denisovans lived there long before modern humans. A fossil jawbone discovered in Bashia Karst Cave revealed they occupied this region. Scientists believe Denisovans evolved genetic adaptations for low oxygen. Later, these genes were passed to modern humans through interbreeding. Today, those same genes help people on the Tibetan Plateau thrive. Denisovans contributed directly to the survival of modern populations. Their story may extend even farther. Genetic evidence suggests they may have lived in warmer parts of Asia, possibly Southeast Asia. This adaptability hints at intelligence and flexibility. They must have understood animal behavior, seasonal plant growth, and safe shelter locations. Knowledge would be passed from elders to children. Children would learn where to find water and which plants were safe to eat. Behind every artifact lies a community of living people, people who cared for their families and shared knowledge. The Denisovans were resilient communities. Though their population faded into history, their adaptations and genetic contributions remain alive today. As our journey continues, we will soon explore another question. How did Denisovans communicate? Did they have language similar to modern humans? Understanding how ancient humans communicated could reveal much about their intelligence and social lives. Join us for the next discovery. Let the story slow once more. Imagine an evening in the distant past. A small group of ancient humans sits near the entrance of a cave. The fire crackles softly, sending sparks upward into the dark. Beyond the light of the fire lies the quiet wilderness of the Ice Age. Inside the circle of warmth, the group shares food and rest after a long day of hunting and gathering. But something else may also be happening. They may be talking. For modern humans, language is one of the most important parts of life. It allows us to share ideas, teach children, plan for the future, and tell stories about the past. But when we think about ancient populations, like the Denisovans, an interesting question arises. Did they also have language? Did they speak to one another in ways similar to modern humans? Or did they communicate through gestures and simple sounds? The truth is that scientists cannot hear the voices of Denisovans. No recordings exist, and language rarely leaves physical traces in the archaeological record. Yet researchers can still study clues. Some of those clues come from genetics. Scientists know that a particular gene, called FOXP2, plays an important role in human speech. This gene helps control certain aspects of brain development related to language and vocal communication. Modern humans possess a specific version of this gene. Interestingly, studies of ancient DNA show that Neanderthals also carried a similar version. This suggests that Neanderthals may have had some capacity for speech. Because of this close relationship, it is possible that Denisovans also shared similar genetic features linked to speech and language. If this is true, Denisovans may have been capable of spoken communication far more complex than simple calls or signals. Language offers powerful advantages for survival. Imagine a hunting group preparing to track animals across a valley. With language, they can describe where animals were seen earlier in the day. They can plan where each hunter should move. They can warn others of danger. Without language, such coordination would be much more difficult. Language also allows knowledge to be passed between generations. Elders can teach children about edible plants. They can describe distant water sources. They can explain which areas are safe and which should be avoided. Over time, these shared lessons become traditions. Traditions become culture. Culture becomes one of the strongest survival tools humans possess. Even if Denisovan language was not identical to modern human speech, they likely had some system of communication that allowed them to cooperate effectively. Another clue comes from archaeology. Artifacts discovered in Denisova Cave suggest that the people living there possessed sophisticated knowledge. Stone tools required skill to create. Decorative objects such as beads and bracelets required planning and craftsmanship. Such activities often involve teaching and learning. If Denisovans were teaching younger members, communication would be essential. Gesture alone might not always be enough. Words or word-like sounds could make teaching much easier. Modern human communication often combines all these elements. We gesture with our hands while speaking. We change our tone of voice to express emotion. We use facial expressions to reinforce meaning. Ancient humans may have done the same. Their conversations might have sounded different from modern languages. Their words might have been shorter or less complex, but the purpose would remain familiar. To connect, to share knowledge, to cooperate, to strengthen relationships within the group. Language is also deeply tied to storytelling. Throughout human history, stories have helped communities remember important lessons. Stories explain how to hunt certain animals, where dangerous predators live, how ancestors survived difficult times. Stories also create a sense of identity. They help people understand who they are and where they come from. Although we have no record of Denisovan stories, it is easy to imagine evenings when elders shared memories beside a fire. Communication would play an important role in Denisovan society. It would shape how knowledge moved through generations. As scientists continue studying Denisovan DNA and archaeology, new discoveries may reveal more clues about their cognitive abilities. They were not silent figures wandering through prehistoric landscapes. They were social beings, living, learning, communicating. As the story moves gently forward, we will soon explore another intriguing question. How large were Denisovan populations? Understanding their population size may help explain why their fossils are so rare today. The mystery of their numbers. Let the story move gently onward. Imagine once again the wide landscapes of ancient Eurasia. Forests stretch across valleys. Rivers wind slowly between mountains. Herds of animals move across open plains as the seasons change. In such enormous spaces, human populations were often small and scattered. This was especially true during the Pleistocene Epoch, when climates shifted frequently and survival required constant adaptation. Among the humans living during this time were the mysterious Denisovans. Yet when scientists search the archaeological record, they find surprisingly few fossils. Only a handful of bones and teeth have been confirmed so far. Most of them come from one location, Denisova Cave. At first glance, this seems puzzling. If Denisovans lived across large areas as genetic evidence suggests, why have we found so few of their remains? To understand this mystery, we must think about population size. Ancient human populations were much smaller than the billions of people alive today. Most groups likely consisted of only a few dozen individuals. Even across large regions, total populations might number only a few thousand people. For example, imagine a Denisovan community living near the Altai Mountains. Their group might include 20 or 30 people. They would move seasonally across the landscape, following animals and searching for food. They might return to familiar shelters like caves, but most of their lives would unfold outdoors across valleys, forests, and open land. When people died, their remains rarely became fossils. Animals might scatter bones, weather might break them down. Plants and soil might slowly absorb them. For a fossil to survive tens of thousands of years, many conditions must be just right. The body must be buried quickly. The soil must protect the bones. And the location must remain undisturbed for thousands of years. Caves like Denisova Cave are ideal places for preserving ancient remains. They protect bones from weather and erosion. But not all human groups lived near caves. Some may have lived mostly in open landscapes, where preservation was far less likely. Another reason for the scarcity of Denisovan fossils may be their population size. Small populations produce fewer individuals. Fewer individuals mean fewer potential fossils. And fewer fossils mean fewer discoveries for archaeologists. Yet despite the small number of fossils, Denisovan DNA appears widely across modern populations in parts of Asia and Oceania. Imagine islands of population separated by vast landscapes. One group might live in northern mountains, another might occupy high plateaus. These groups may have rarely met one another, but occasionally they may have encountered other human populations, such as Homo sapiens or Neanderthals. When these encounters happened, interbreeding sometimes occurred. The resulting children carried mixed ancestry. Even if Denisovan communities eventually disappeared, their genes would continue traveling forward through time. Migration patterns also played a role. During the Ice Age, changing climates forced humans to move frequently. Glaciers expanded and retreated. Water sources shifted across the land. Human groups had to follow these changes to survive. Their roots may have taken them from Siberian mountains to the highlands of the Tibetan Plateau, and possibly even farther south. Today, archaeologists continue searching caves and ancient sites throughout Asia. Each new excavation offers the possibility of finding more. In some cases, researchers have even detected Denisovan DNA preserved in cave sediments. Tiny fragments of genetic material left behind. It is like discovering footprints long after the travelers have gone. The mystery of Denisovan numbers remains unsolved, but each new discovery adds another piece to the puzzle. Slowly, the picture of Denisovan life becomes clearer. We begin to understand how they moved across enormous landscapes. As the night deepens, we will soon explore another fascinating topic. What caused the Denisovans to disappear?